everybody. Welcome to You Are the Operant Power with Gail. And
Hi, I'm Jane.
um, Jane and I meet regularly. We get together, and the concept behind the videos is you're a fly on the wall to our conversations. Believe it or not, these are the conversations that we have on a regular basis. So we thought, you know what, there might be people that have an interest because we often talk about things that are interesting. There's so much information out there, and when you start digging into, being empowered, like it's amazing what's available. So we started with the concept You Are the Operant Power, which if you're familiar with Neville Goddard, he sort of made that popular in that in the whole New Thought empowerment area, which is growing and growing and growing, which is kind of cool. But Jane, do you want to share what our thoughts were behind using You Are the Operant Power?
Yeah, well, especially Neville Goddard, you came to me with the information about him. I listened to him on YouTube. I was quite impressed. It seemed to fit with some questions I had about my own authentic, powerful self. And we're always trying to, I feel like we always try to support each other to get rid of certain narratives and go back to that you are the operant power. So it becomes a better, more supportive conversation, even I would say, than just getting together and commiserating and being hopeless or negative, or because of course we all struggle with day-to-day stuff. So we usually talk about day-to-day stuff that comes up. I've talked to you a lot about owning that power. So it really fits with our friendship. It really fits with our style of communicating.
Yeah. Well, and the foundation for our videos, our video sessions, our video series, whatever it turns out to be, is the idea that we create our reality.
Right.
And in doing that, one of the number one things that you need to be able to do is take responsibility for everything in your reality. That's where it gets a little bit, the concept is very simple. It's a little more challenging to actually live it, because you're having to identify those areas. It goes against our programming. So that's the basis of the You Are the Operant Power, the foundation being, we create our reality, we take responsibility for that, and then we view life from that perspective. And we're going to talk over the next couple of weeks, months, years, who knows how long this is going to last, various concepts, various words that are thrown around a lot, but I think we're going to talk about them more from a different perspective than what they're normally talked about. I mean, outside of Neville Goddard community.
Well, I like to think that we're unique in that that's the nature and beauty of YouTube, is that, we can follow a strict formula to get viewership in any arena, I suppose, in media. And also we can do whatever we want. And it's nice to, for me at least, because I've been thinking about doing YouTube for a while, to be able to present just a more relaxed version. And also, I feel like in these videos, there isn't a lot on YouTube that usually it's someone's written a book and they're sharing their information with the interviewer, and there's one primary interviewer. I would like this to be more flow, like we've talked about flow, like, have a good flow, because often we don't have someone we can talk to about certain things, or, and this is just like, I figure if people watch this, they might see something that's going on between us that they could create in their own version, in their own life, in their own relationships, even, because it's easy to talk to yourself. It's nice to have that mirrored back to you and share like some of the
Well, be able to understand what's being.
understand. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, cool. So why don't we just take a moment? I mean, this is going to be a fairly short introductory video.
Okay.
But the whole idea of you are the operant power, you are the creator of your reality. When did that kind of make sense to you? Like, was there certain experience that you had before you even knew this that just like, oh, wow, that's true, because I didn't even know that's how it was. And in hindsight, I can see, I thought that, I believed that, and I ended up in that very situation that in a lot of cases, it's that you don't want to be in, but then there is times when it's that you want to be in, even though it's unconscious at the time.
Yes. Well, I want to say that we had been talking for a while about Neville Goddard. I used to call you when I was having moments during a court process. And I want to use this example because I think it just came to mind as you asked me, and I'd forgotten that it's an awesome example. And I had a situation come up where I had to actually apply all the things that we were talking about, and it all came down to this one moment. And I can remember just repeating to myself, I am the operant power here. I am. And I was walking up and down the hallway in the courthouse, and I went into the courtroom, and I had already envisioned in my mind everything that was going to happen, because I was so in that time period, I was manifesting and going over and over in my mind to relieve myself, to put it down before I went in. And I walked in completely unprepared for a part of the process that most people would have said, oh, you can't do that, that'll never happen. Because I got a lot of advice that way. Oh, that'll never happen. A lot of fear advice. And you would never give that to me. Say, see what you want and go in and get it. And I stayed in my authentic place that, no, this is the way it's going to be. And I just kept repeating myself. And miracles happened that day. Like what normally would, and even the judge that was overseeing that particular day commented, and there were Durham College students in the courtroom that day learning about law. And I had found this piece of law, and and it's interesting, in the process of law, you have to repeat. You have to repeat, because everything can get taken away from the point. And it's a maneuver of staying on the point. So something in me just kept going, no, that thing, no, that thing, no. I was like a machine. I was just like, and brought it back. And he commented, he goes, well, you're absolutely right. And yes, I actually do have to and he wrote it in words. Like it went even beyond what I had imagined. So the feeling of, I can't describe it, because if I had been in the fact world and swayed by what others were saying to me or limiting me or making me fear, there's no way that would have happened. So I think that was a big moment for me. I really, when you just said that, I was just like, oh yeah, like that had to have been, and in other areas, but in that particular moment, it was just astounding to stay in that power and realize. And from that moment on, even when I'm dealing in just the minutest detail of my life, say you're phoning a company for information or stuff like that. It's like, no, this is what I need. This is what I need. I already did this. It's already done. You're just, and it's almost like, I want to say it's almost like getting rid of any other story.
Well, what it is focused on what you want.
Yeah. And it's like
There's nothing else exists but what you want.
and I wanted it. And also helping that process, I suppose, like you said, you get into different experiences where the process itself had to bring that, like, it was like, put your money where your mouth is. Like, you keep saying you're this, and are you going to fall out of because you just fall out of that end if you don't.
Yeah. You, as soon as you go into fear, because fear, especially initially, is so intense because that's our programming. Things show up like that because you've got that intensity of the feeling of fear that it shows up like that.
Well, and when I used to call you about that stuff, I used to be really fearful, and you used to just repeat the most simplest thing back to me. It wasn't like a big process of,
you want, Jane?
What do you want, Jane? Hey, wait a minute. And I'd go back into my, but yeah, and then you go, okay, what do you want?
Yeah,
it's interesting.
That's it. And granted, it's like I said, it's simple. It's not always easy to bring yourself back, but the more you do it, the more you focus on getting to that place. And then, eventually it's an ongoing process all along, but you get to that point where it just is, that is just is, and you don't even have to focus on it anymore. The sun comes up, you just know that it does. And so you don't focus on like, oh, the sun's coming up in the morning, the sun's, you don't even have to worry about, yeah, it's coming up. It always does.
Yes.
It's natural to you.
Well,
and the more you get in your power, which is focusing on what you want, knowing that you're creating your reality, the more natural it becomes, and it takes very little focus on individual things because you just, health is one for me that is very natural, and it, you feel a little bit off, or you kind of wrench your knee or something like that.
yeah.
It's not oh my god, that hurts, oh my god, did you see what happened to me? I just no, it's like you go right into your head.
Yes.
And for the knee one, it was I what do you call it when the knee goes backwards? Hyperextended my knee, and because I stepped in a hole, and I was like, oh, oh, I felt that, and it's like, nope. Revised it, so I went back and saw myself just walking normally, and then in my head, if I felt any inkling of pain in my head, I was doing jumping jacks. So I took the focus away from the pain onto me doing jumping jacks, because you can't do jumping jacks if you have a bad knee.
Right? Yes. Yeah.
Do jumping jacks. And then I forgot about it.
Yeah.
And an hour or 2 hours later, I'm like, oh, geez, I forgot I hurt my knee. Forgot I did that to my knee because I wasn't feeling it anymore.
Well, because we tend to do that, like, hyper focus on it. Oh, what if
you don't want.
Yeah.
Pain is not what I wanted.
Yeah.
What I wanted was, I didn't want to do jumping jacks, but I didn't, that was the implication of doing jumping jacks, was that I didn't have any pain or a bad leg.
Well, I did that walking. I wiped out. I was walking through the woods and I was fed up wearing my boots. So I put on my running shoes and I kind of was like on the ice knowing, well, I'm probably going to fall. Like, this is pretty treacherous. So I'd already set myself up for failure there. And sure enough, I fell. But immediately I did that thing where I was like, oh, well, I used to do this in gymnastics all the time and just get up and keep going. So I just got up, kept going, and I walked and I might have felt like a little twinge, but I kept just like, no, this isn't anything. It's nothing. It's done. And just went on as if it had not happened, and didn't focus on it, and didn't have any
Yeah,
repercussions from it.
our minds are very powerful. We
Oh,
don't.
and the thing, yeah, and the thing on my head, I had like this little thing on my head, like a little skin tuft thingy. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Where'd that come from? I don't like those. I don't want that. And I said it'll disappear on its own. And it got bigger and it was bugging me. And then all of a sudden one day I went like that and it was gone. And I was like, oh, I did, you know.
I had a similar experience with the mole. For me, before I knew anything about Neville Goddard, one thing I noticed was that there were certain beliefs that I had that like, that's just how it is. You know, let me just pick up some wild examples. Say somebody having an affair. You know, oh, you don't have an affair. That's, you know, you get out of the marriage and then you have the affair. Like, no question about it. Black and white, that's how it is. And not, I haven't been in this situation, but in the situation of the person that has been through this, you know, they came to a point where things weren't great in their marriage. Excuse me. And they ended up, you know, meeting somebody. And I looked at that and I just thought, like, because my belief was black and white, get out of the marriage first. And then getting their side of the story, it was like, oh, you know what? Anybody could fall into that. It'd be very easy for people to fall into that. And it was a matter of, I was so focused on this is how it should be that I, through this person, experienced the other side of it.
Right.
And noticed like, oh, well, like they're not a rotten person. Sorry, I should have got a drink. They're not a rotten person. They're not a bad person. In either party is bad people. Like, it's not really fair for me to have judged black and white.
Right.
Been in that experience in the first place.
Well, even that, like, if you've got two sides of a story and I come to you and I go, oh, well, I'm a victim. I was hurt. I was like, I never get away with that with you. It's always like, never. It's never like you go, oh, well, yes, poor you. That person's a horrible person. And that's what I think over time has been what keeps us talking about things, because eventually nobody wants to be around a victim all the time, and nobody wants to hear about things you can't do anything about. So it is helpful
to not even so much.
Well, no, yeah.
Get into this in a future video. There's no power in judging.
Yeah.
Your power comes from not judging.
Yes.
And deciding what you want and focusing on what you want. But we'll talk about that more because it's a little bit more in depth than that. But there is no power ultimately in judging.
Yeah,
good or bad, whether you judge them good or bad. One of the things for the audience here, there may be occasion where we bring up the Bible. Neville Goddard talked about the Bible. There's a few really good people out there that are sharing the decoded version of the Bible, because the Bible is actually a psychological script as opposed to a literal history. So from the judgment point of view, judgment is eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And our goal is to be eating from the tree of life, which
right.
is no judgment.
Right.
So, but again, we'll get into that in a future video.
Well, and yeah, and we can share some of our experiences too, because experience speaks volumes, right?
Yeah, yeah. I just found when I found what Neville shares, I mean, and the funny thing is, I had realized a lot of the stuff of what Neville shared on my own, just intuitively from my experiences, but didn't know to sort of put it together to understand everything fully. Um, but one of the things that I noticed is I had a legal challenge. And I remember at the very beginning, you know, I challenged, I don't want to get into it, but I challenged Caesar. um, One of the things, the only fear I had was going bankrupt. And that, long story short, years down the road, I didn't care. I did not go bankrupt until I gave up that it was acceptable to go. I didn't care anymore, which is akin to accepting it as being something that's okay to happen. Whereas up to that point, nope, nope. You know, I was very convicted that no, I was not going to go. And then at that point, it didn't matter anymore because of where I was at and the things that were going on. It really didn't matter to me anymore. And so it happened. And so then I found Neville, you know, months later, and I look back, it's like, I totally see how I did that. Totally. The thing is, we don't always remember what our thoughts are because our imagination is working 24/7. It's actually, we imagine the outcome that we experience in everything. And so that's part of the whole taking responsibility. To your imagination. I say a word to you and it automatically triggers feelings and a vision of some sort, even though you don't necessarily consciously see it. When I'm saying to you, automatically creates a vision which has you imagining that.
Mm. Well,
So,
I was, yeah.
and
So,
again, in future videos, we'll get into the laws of the mind, the disciplines of the mind, and talk a little bit more about that
yes.
as an
Okay.
explanation for all of this.
And is there, to ask you the same question, was there a moment when you realized you were the operant power in your life?
Well, when I would look back at like that bankruptcy thing, I mean, that happened over, you know, numerous years, but I remember distinctly the idea of I'm not going bankrupt.
I remember that.
But now another thing, and this was kind of a good
It was kind of I remember that time because I remember we were walking the dogs a lot together, and I remember there was kind of a turning point. We got together, and you seemed, your energy seemed really different because energetically, there's fear is very different than being the creator of your own reality. There's
that's
this sense of, you know, something external controlling our outcome.
right. Well, another example, and again, around this whole, the bankruptcy, but this is a different scenario, you know, stay-at-home mom, debt wheel, stuck on the debt wheel. Um, I didn't have an issue with that, but at one point we got to like, okay, we need to make a decision. And at that time, bankruptcy again was not a choice, not a choice at all. But this time I was really, really upset. And because this is early on, and I was in a lot of fear and shame and all of that sort of stuff, right? That whole idea of going bankruptcy, like, oh, you know, it's shameful, it's embarrassing, it's
Yeah,
almost,
yeah,
it really isn't. But anyways, at that time it
yeah.
was. And so I started looking like and this is probably one of those movement times for me. It's like, you know, life can't, it's not supposed to be like this. Like, what the heck? And if I think about that time, like I can totally see how the debt was created. I didn't know any different. You know, I was
Yes.
focused on what I didn't want because I just didn't know that there was an alternative.
Hmm.
I found something called the golden key, And from that, I just created a visual for myself to be able to use that concept of letting go of fear, letting go of worry, anything that wasn't beneficial to me. Because I
So
figured, if either I can enjoy my life and end up bankrupt, or I can be miserable and end up bankrupt. I mean, bankruptcy wasn't sort of an issue, but I was taking the power away from it.
yes, yes, yes.
I'm going to be happy or I'm going to be miserable. My choice.
Right,
So
right. So
started
it's feeling it real, feeling that feeling real of, I don't, you know, that
well,
was
what I
part of,
wanted to feel real is I finally just decided I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I created this visual for myself I called the Freedom Star. And so I would send all the energy of everything that I didn't want to hold on to, fear, worry, frustration, all of that stuff. I sent that all to the Freedom Star when I would go to bed at night. And then I think it was like 2 days, 3 days later, I got a phone call from a bank. And I'm like, oh, geez, the last person I want to talk to is a bank, especially a bank that I don't bank with, right?
I think I remember that.
Yeah. And so it took me 4 or 5 days before I called her back because I'm like, oh, geez, what do you want? Like, I don't need any more to get into any more strife. And I can't imagine what you want because I don't even bank with you. But anyways, I finally got the nerve up to call her. And she said I'd been pre-approved for this dollar amount line of credit. I was like, what? And when I went in there, I'm like, are you sure about this? Because like, if I came in here for this line of credit, you would never approve me for it because you just wouldn't. I know you wouldn't. She's like, oh, it's just right here. Just sign. That's all you have to do.
You're like, yeah.
So I sign. And then she says to me, well, why don't we look at, your mortgage, redoing your mortgage to cover debt and stuff like that, right? And I'm like, well, you know what, we can do it for fun, but I know, how am I going to be approved, right? The ratios are so high, blah, blah, blah. She's like, well, let's look at it. So we put the numbers down and she's like, ooh, well, we can send it anyways, just in case. She wasn't so happy about it once the numbers got down, right? So I left there and she's like, it'll take probably 3 days for them to get back to us and stuff. I'm like, okay. And I distinctly remember leaving the bank and thinking, you know what, this is beyond me now, it's yours. Referring, I guess, to God at the time, not realizing who God actually was. But I'm like, you know what, it's yours. And I heard back from her by the time I got home. It was a 20-minute drive. And I got the approval. She phoned me just after I got home. And it was,
wow.
so like that, and I'm like, I don't even understand what just happened here. I understand it now, but back then I'm like, what kind of stuff is this going on? But it was still a couple of years before I actually found Neville to figure out exactly what had happened. But it was kind of a cool.
Well, I guess
what is this?
I guess without explaining too much about Neville Goddard, but something, it is helpful to listen to some of his lectures.
Yeah.
Because
just before you go into that, Neville is a part of this, but I'm hoping that we're going to look at things more from the big picture as opposed to specifically, because he was very specific for that time. Rita
yes,
Craigwell actually has a lot of good stuff too that's out there, and she talks about Neville and talks about numerous other New Thought authors, and we've sort of progressed since Neville's time, and not that everything that Neville shared was, valid and useful and created, a good foundation, but it's not. I'm learning as I'm going on. It's like the big picture is actually the faster way to get where you want to go, as opposed to it was very sort of, let's look at this moment. Let's look at this moment. And I may not be doing justice to him, but what I'm hoping is that we can sort of focus on the bigger picture. And but yeah, definitely listen to him. The first one that I listened to was The Law of Liberty. I was totally against anything Bible related, but I just bit my tongue and listened, and
Yeah.
things, not necessarily the biblical aspects of it, but things made sense to me that he was saying. And it probably took me 2, maybe even 3 years before I got comfortable even opening up the Bible, even though knowing it's not a literal history, that there's interpretations to it that we've not been privy to, and religion doesn't provide those interpretations. And then once you kind of been looking at that, it's like, whoa, like this just makes sense.
Well, I wonder too, because at that time I was finding that legalese, understanding legal language, and our ability to articulate apparently is closely associated with our intelligent quotient or whatever. But having the ability to articulate helps you to express and connect and communicate. So learning, like listening to Neville, he speaks, and same with a few other gurus of that sort of even that time period. Like even in the 70s, there was a lot of, it's almost like there's language and words that if you pay attention to those words more closely and connect with them, and
The original meaning of them.
yes, then, well, and also being able to put across your ideas. Like when we're talking, sometimes I tend to think about what I'm going to say more, because I know that you don't speak in fear, which sounds really weird, but a lot of people like speaking in the fear language. There's a lot of ways you can get into conversations that just lead down that road of, yeah, isn't it a crappy day? And, like just people, I don't know. I feel like language and word is what I was going to say about the Bible is it was similar to learning legalese, because I used to read the Bible because I was a reader when I was young, and it's like, of course I want to read the Bible. It's another book too, right? And I'd get into it and I'd be like, whoa, what is this? And I try to make sense of it. And I used to be able to read the Psalms because I loved poetry, and the Psalms kind of resonated with me. But when I was doing legal language, I noticed the same thing. Eventually, even though I would fill in the blanks to the words I didn't really know, and same with Neville, if I didn't relate to it, I just listened. And eventually this language came about, and just paying attention to language, paying attention to what you're saying versus just blurting out whatever's on your mind.
But now, yes, but when you're blurting, I mean, that's a time of, if you're going to take responsibility, and you're going to, in doing so, you're going to be not judging yourself, but you're going to be watching what your reactions are, what your thinking is, what you're saying. And if it's not, where you want to be, then that's your opportunity to change that. So when you're blurting out, that's your honest feeling.
Right.
So you want to, at least if you're going to change it for somebody else, you want to at least recognize that, oh no, this is really how I would respond, not the other way. This is how I would. So it doesn't matter what I think about what you say. What matters is what you think about what you say.
Okay. So is there a regulated version? Like, I guess I'm trying to get at, like, is there a way to regulate what you say in order to get
Does your response fit with who you believe yourself to be?
yes. Right. That's a good one. Does your response fit for who you want to be? I like that.
Yeah.
And we don't, that's what I'm saying. Like, we're not really always focused on that. Sometimes, like, we're focused more in reaction, especially when we talk to our girlfriends sometimes, or whoever, like that person that you're just like, ah. So that's a really good one. Does your response fit who you want to be?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's about non-judgment, right? Um,
And also knowing who you want to be.
well, yeah, and that's why we're going to go to the sort of the
Yeah.
big picture, right? Because that opens up a whole new world for you. Um, so is your response, is that how you want to perceive life? What I actually do is, because making a choice to live subjectively, that means making a choice to eat from the tree of life, which is a place of non-judgment. So of course, it's a work in progress, and all of this is a process, and it won't be done over, a day or two or a couple of videos, because we have a lot of depth to us that
Yeah.
we're constantly being thrown up to us for our recognition to deal with,
Yeah.
accept or not accept. Um, so in living from the tree of life, that's what I use as my guide. If I catch myself responding, oh, is that a judgment? That doesn't fit who I am anymore. I used to maybe be judgmental, but now I see that, everybody loves whatever. Everybody is love. All is love. All is God. There's only one. And again, we'll talk about that when we talk about the laws of mind in future videos. If all is God, then what are we judging? When we're judging another, we're actually judging ourselves.
Mm. Yeah, it's neat times, I think, for people to look at themselves. Like we're kind of looking at ourselves a little bit more, maybe.
Well, you know what? There's so much going on out there. I mean, I've said this numerous times. If I hadn't learned this that I'm learning and experiencing as I go along, like, how stressed would I be with everything that's going on?
Mhm.
When you're living, from the outside in, it's like, whoa, you got to be overwhelmed because
Yeah,
there's so much stuff going on. And that's why, if people are saying, like, what the heck, I mean, we all get there, right? We've all been there where life has got to be more than this. And so then we start searching, or somebody comes along that mentions something. And we're like, oh, okay, maybe I'll go and look at that. And, oh, okay, well, that sort of makes sense. What else do they have to say? And you go
yeah.
down, that makes sense. What else do they have to say? Um, and then we just, we start our path. I mean, we're always on our path, but we start being the director of it. And the hardest thing to understand, and we probably should cut this off soon, but
Yeah.
most challenging thing is to live subjectively,
Yeah.
because objectively means responding with our senses, all of our
Yeah.
physical senses.
Mm.
Subjectively is ignoring those senses. And so it becomes a real challenge because we have so much being thrown at us.
So subjectively, it's almost like you're taking the information and revising it to fit your end rather than feeling.
The whole idea is you to start it, like, no information is coming here, it's going out.
Right, is to
And then
be
you're
the
being shown what's in your head.
whether. Yeah.
So when, every person and thing in your life, in your reality, is a belief or a thought
Yes.
that's manifested in that form.
Yeah.
So their responses to you, what's going on around you, is showing you what you hold in your consciousness.
Right.
And Mike, computer here is saying the battery is running low.
Okay, well, that's a good place to stop.
Yeah.
We can
So anyway,
stop. We can restart too on a particular part of that.
yeah. So we'll leave it at this. I hope people enjoyed the conversation, enjoyed being the fly on the wall. We haven't really decided yet. At least weekly, we'll be doing videos,
Yeah.
maybe a couple of times a week. We'll see how we're going to let this just grow organically. If you have any questions, any topics that you want to see us discuss, by all means, please send us a message or leave a message below. Like and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. Have a good day, Jane.
All right, you too, Gail.
Take
That's
care.
great. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.